My name is Susie. I'm 72 years old, widowed 3 years now, and living alone in the house I've owned for over 4 decades. My son Lorenzo and his wife Alexa visit often, not as often as I'd like, but often enough to keep up the appearance of family unity. I've always tried to give them space, to be the kind of mother-in-law that never intrudes. I suppose that's what makes this all the more painful. It happened on a Thursday evening, after dinner. I'd made beef lasagna, Lorenzo's favorite since childhood. He'd eaten 3 helpings. Alexa, thin in particular, barely touched her plate, choosing instead to sip at her wine and pick at the salad. Her eyes flicked around my dining room, as if she was cataloging it. "You know," Alexa said, her voice just a little too light, "I've been reading about home safety and things older adults should be cautious of, like safes in bedrooms, keys that could get misplaced, especially if something were to happen." She glanced at me over her wine glass, watching my reaction like a hawk. Lorenzo was absorbed in his phone, oblivious as usual. I put down my fork and stared at her. "What do you mean, if something happens to me?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. She gave a little laugh, the kind you give when you're pretending something is a joke that isn't. "Oh, I didn't mean it that way. Just that you live alone. Things happen. It's smart to have someone else know where things are, for emergencies." She said emergencies like she already had one in mind. It wasn't the first time she'd asked about the safe. A few months back, she'd brought it up while helping me fold laundry. "I've always wondered what people keep in those little wall safes," she'd said, casually flipping through my drawer, as though looking for a misplaced sock. "Jewelry? Documents? Cash?" That night, I'd brushed it off. But tonight, her curiosity had teeth. After they left, I did the dishes in silence. My husband George used to dry while I washed. Now it was just me and the soft clink of plates. I tried to tell myself I was overreacting. Maybe Alexa was just nosy. Maybe she really did mean well. But when I went upstairs to my bedroom and opened the top drawer of my dresser, the small dish where I always kept the safe key was empty. Gone. My heart began to pound, hard and deep in my chest. I opened all the drawers. Nothing. I checked my coat pockets, the bathroom, even the junk drawer in the kitchen. I hadn't moved that key in years. I hadn't needed to. I knew with bone-deep certainty that someone had taken it. And the only people who had been in the house today were my son and his wife. I sat down on the edge of my bed and stared at the floor for a long time. The silence of the house suddenly felt unfamiliar, like it didn't belong to me anymore, like I was the guest now. That night, I didn't sleep much. I lay in bed with my eyes half shut, listening for creaks in the hallway. I didn't hear anything, but sometime around 3:30 a.m., I thought I caught the soft hum of the garage door opening. I wasn't sure. Maybe it was a dream. The next morning, I checked the safe. It was closed. The keypad untouched. Nothing seemed disturbed. But that wasn't comforting, because I knew what Alexa didn't. The key she'd taken, the one she thought would open my world, didn't go to the safe in the wall. Not anymore. After George died, I had the lock changed. I kept that key in the drawer to see if anyone ever went looking for it. And now I had my answer. I sat at the kitchen table and made a list. I wrote down dates, conversations, comments Alexa had made over the years that seemed off at the time, but now rang loud and clear. I began to build a timeline of suspicion, like a detective in a movie. I wasn't going to confront her, not yet. If she thought I was old, frail, and half-blind, let her. Let her think I was sleeping when she crept into my room. Let her believe I was gullible enough to leave the key lying around. If she wanted to play games, she picked the wrong opponent. I had something she didn't. Time. And now, motive. In the days that followed, I changed the locks on the front and back doors. I bought a discreet little nanny cam and placed it inside the hollowed-out spine of an old encyclopedia on my bookshelf, pointed straight at my bedroom door. I even put a tiny security camera inside my nightstand drawer. I made sure the old key was back in its dish. And I waited. I waited for Alexa to try again, because whatever she thought was in that safe, whatever she believed she would find, she was wrong. And when she finally opened it, thinking I was asleep, thinking she'd won, she would find something she could never unsee. She would never forget it. I don't sleep much anymore. Not deeply. Not the way I used to before George died, when I could sink into the mattress and know that no one in the house would harm me. Back then, sleep felt like rest. Now, sleep feels like a risk. It was just after 1 a.m. when I heard it. The low murmur of a voice behind the guest room door. Alexa's voice. Lorenzo had left that morning for a conference in Dallas, a 3-day work trip he'd mentioned during dinner, seemingly unimportant at the time. Alexa had insisted on staying behind, said she was worried about me being alone. She'd smiled so sweetly as she said it that I almost believed her. Almost. I padded out of bed and crept barefoot into the hallway, the house cloaked in shadows, lit only by the dull blue haze of the moon pouring in through the high windows. The guest room door was slightly ajar. Just enough. She was on the phone. "No, I'm telling you, it's all in the house," Alexa whispered, her tone sharp and quick. "She has old account statements, deeds, everything. And there's a second safe. I saw the edge of it under that stupid quilt she uses to line her closet shelf." My breath caught. She was talking about the little metal lockbox George had used to store backup documents, things we hadn't looked at in years. I'd moved it to the back of the closet years ago, buried under blankets. She must have been rifling through when I was in the garden yesterday morning. "I can get the key," Alexa continued, her voice tightening. "He's out of town, so it's perfect. Just need a little more time." A pause. "No, she's not a problem. She's old. Half the time she doesn't even know what day it is." I stepped back quietly, the insult sliding through me like ice. My mind was spinning, trying to anchor itself in something concrete. And then her next sentence chilled me. "You come Thursday night. I'll leave the side gate open. Bring gloves. We'll do it quiet. She's a deep sleeper." I didn't breathe until I was back in my room, door locked, the old hardwood floor creaking beneath my weight like it had done for decades. I sat on the edge of the bed and gripped the bedpost until the spinning stopped. She wasn't just scheming, she was planning a robbery. She was planning to steal from me in my own home while my son, her husband, was hundreds of miles away. I pressed my hand to my chest, not from fear but fury. And under the fury, another feeling. A dull, heavy sadness. I didn't know when exactly Lorenzo had started depending on Alexa for everything. I didn't know when my son had stopped thinking for himself, but I remembered the day he came home, broke and quiet, with that same slumped posture he used to have after bad little league games. He'd just lost his job. Something about downsizing, poor performance, all the usual nonsense that companies say when they push out the overqualified for someone cheaper. He stood on my front porch that day, his shoulders heavy with shame, and asked if he could stay just for a few weeks. I said yes, of course. I made up the guest bed. I stocked the fridge. I let him have the space he needed. Alexa followed the next week. She'd shown up with suitcases, a fake smile, and a fresh manicure, like she was checking into a hotel. "Thanks for letting us stay here, Susie," she'd said, wrapping her arms around me like we were girlfriends, like I was just another stepping stone in her perfect little plan. Over the next few weeks, I watched her carefully. I noticed how she began asking small questions. Did George keep the deed somewhere accessible? Do you happen to know the password to the estate lawyer's website? At first, I chalked it up to curiosity, but it grew. Subtle, probing. She started joining me in the study more often, pretending to read, her eyes always wandering to the locked cabinet where I kept our old records. Then, one morning, I found my office chair slightly askew, the way it always looked after I used it, not how I'd left it the night before. She'd been snooping. It was about money. I'd always known that in my bones. But what I hadn't known, not until last week, was just how bad her situation really was. I'd been at the bank earlier that day, getting copies of George's documents, when I overheard two tellers whispering behind the desk. One of them, a girl in her early 20s with too much perfume and an eager smile, was telling the other about a woman named Alexa who keeps coming in, trying to cash out investments she doesn't even own. She was red-faced last time, the girl had said. She got denied again. Looks like she owes someone. Gambling, I'd realized then. It fit. The late-night phone calls. The mysterious charges that Lorenzo once brushed off as old bills. The frantic look I'd caught on Alexa's face when a strange man showed up at the door, asking for her by a different name. Now it all made sense. She was desperate. She wasn't just greedy, she was drowning. And now I knew, without a shred of doubt, that she would hurt me to get what she wanted. I stood in front of the mirror that night, brushing my hair with slow strokes, thinking about George. He'd always told me to trust my instincts. "You see people," he'd said. "You always know what they're not saying." Well, now I saw Alexa for what she really was. A woman who thought she was smarter than me. She thought I was blind, that I would sleep while she picked apart the life George and I built, piece by piece. But she was wrong. Because I was done waiting, I was going to prepare. First, I took the camera from the bookshelf and repositioned it, pointing it toward the hallway outside the guest room. Then I pulled out the second camera I'd bought last month and tucked it inside a decorative vase in the living room. I set the motion alerts to trigger silently. I had more in storage, still in boxes. Tomorrow, I'd install one by the back gate, the one Alexa said she'd leave open. Let her. Let her do exactly what she said she would. I'd also moved the lockbox, but not far. Just enough to make it look untouched. I had a decoy, one George had used during tax season years ago. I'd fill it with fake documents, old insurance policies, wills dated 15 years ago, enough to look real, just enough to bait her. And the real papers? The real safe? She'd never find it, not in a million years. Let her come. Let her think I'm asleep. Let her believe I'm defenseless. She'll learn the hard way that no one plays me for a fool. Not in my house. Not while I'm still breathing. That morning, I greeted Alexa in my thickest robe and a carefully mussed bun, the kind of look a woman wears when she's stopped trying. I shuffled into the kitchen like I hadn't slept, slippers dragging, shoulders hunched, and I made sure to let out a soft, pitiful sigh as I reached for the teapot. "Did you sleep okay?" she asked, her voice bright, almost cheerful. I blinked at her for a moment, then gave a tired chuckle. "Oh, you know me. I was up half the night looking for my reading glasses. I must have left them in the fridge or something silly like that." She laughed, too quickly, then folded her arms across her designer sweater and leaned against the counter. "You really ought to get some rest, Susie. You've been forgetting things lately. You're doing too much for someone your age." I stirred my tea slowly, hiding the tightness in my jaw with a fragile smile. "That's sweet of you, dear. You're probably right. I don't know why I hang on to so much clutter. I've been meaning to clean out that dresser upstairs for weeks." I turned toward her, blinking as if the idea had just floated into my tired little head. "You know what? I might start today. Maybe even clear out the old keys and junk." That got her attention. Her mouth parted just slightly before she covered it with another grin. "Well, don't wear yourself out," she said, tone dipped in syrup. I knew she'd be watching. Perfect. Around 10:30, I made a show of getting ready to run errands. I rattled my purse loud enough for her to hear and exaggerated the effort of finding my coat, letting out little puffs of breath and muttering about my knees. "Going to the craft store," I said. "Might as well do something fun while I'm out. Maybe pick up some little decorations for the garden shed." Truth was, I wasn't going for flowers or trinkets. I was going for confetti and sequins, and the spring-loaded mechanism I'd once used for a Halloween prank 5 years ago. A silly little thing George had rigged to burst open when someone opened the pantry door. At the time, we'd used it to startle kids. Now, I was going to use it to catch a criminal. In the store, I moved slowly, pretending to be just another old lady hunting for party supplies. I picked out 2 small bags of glittery star-shaped confetti, one of multicolored sequins, and a small wind-up mechanism from the crafts aisle, the kind you use for pop-up cards or exploding gift boxes. I also found a pack of hollowed novelty drawer liners with secret compartments. What a world we live in. By the time I returned home, Alexa was in the sunroom with her phone, her posture casual, but her eyes flicked toward me the second I came through the door. Watching again. Tracking. I offered a smile and said, "Don't mind me. Just picking up where I left off upstairs. Might as well do something with all this energy while I still have it." She didn't reply, just nodded and glanced back at her screen, but I knew she'd be counting down the minutes until I left the room. I waited. An hour passed. I moved around my bedroom slowly, pulling out drawers, sorting scarves, refolding socks, all for her benefit in case she was listening. Finally, I slipped into the closet, shut the door softly, and got to work. First, I cleaned out the drawer where the old safe key used to be. I cleared everything and placed a small velvet pouch right in the front, just visible enough to tempt her, just heavy enough to feel real. Inside was a fake brass key, aged with a little vinegar and lemon juice to give it that authentic patina. I even etched a tiny S on the head of the key to make it feel personal. The spring mechanism was delicate, but I'd practiced last night on an empty drawer. I mounted it just under the lip of the velvet pouch, tying it with transparent filament to a latch on the drawer itself. When the pouch was lifted, even slightly, the latch would snap free and the spring would release. Then, boom. A burst of confetti and sequins would fly up into her face, and I'd be watching the whole thing. I tucked one of the nanny cams directly into a small antique clock facing the drawer. It was hidden well. Even I had to squint to see the lens, but the view was perfect. Every movement in the room, every expression on her face when that trap went off, would be captured in high-definition clarity. And best of all, the camera had a silent alert system. As soon as it detected movement near the drawer, I'd get a vibration on the tiny remote clipped to the inside of my robe pocket. I sealed everything up, triple-checked the latch, and returned the drawer to its usual place, just slightly ajar, just enough to tempt. By early afternoon, Alexa passed me in the hallway, smiling like the cat who'd found the cream. "Tired already?" she asked. "Oh, exhausted," I mumbled, rubbing my temples. "I think I'll lie down. That cleaning wore me out." "Let me know if you need anything." "I'll be fine," I said, voice thin. "I just need to close my eyes for a bit." And with that, I pulled my bedroom door closed behind me, turned off the overhead light, and sat silently in the armchair beside the window. Out of sight, remote in hand, camera feed live on my old iPad. She'd take the bait. She had to. The key, the drawer, the opportunity, all perfectly set. She thought she was playing a long game. She thought I was weak, harmless, sleepy, but I'd never been more awake. Let her come. Population. The stars exploded. Confetti and sequins burst upward, clinging to her hair, her eyelashes, the front of her black pajama top. She gasped, not loud but startled. And then came the words I'd been waiting for. "Oh my God! What the hell is this?" She coughed once, then hissed into her phone, barely audible. "It's rigged." "That old witch rigged it." A pause. "I thought you said she was clueless." Pause. "I don't know. She probably left the key here on purpose. The papers aren't even in this drawer. Just fake stuff. Damn it." That was it. That was what I needed. She stood there for a moment, brushing at her shirt, then turned and slipped back out of the room. But it didn't matter. I had everything: the footage, the sound, the confession. The glitter was still on her chest when I passed her the next morning in the hallway. She gave me a tight smile, quickly turned away, probably already planning her next excuse. And me? I just smiled back. Because the trap hadn't just caught a thief. It had unmasked a liar. The afternoon sun filtered through the curtains in my bedroom, soft and golden, the kind of light that used to make George hum to himself while he shaved. Now it only cast long, slanted shadows across the floor, brushing the edge of my dresser, the one that would soon become a crime scene. Or at least the stage for one, because tonight I'd be ready. By the time Alexa wandered off to the salon, or wherever she went on Thursday afternoons, I had already tucked my errands into 2 small bags and placed them on the bed. A packet of metallic confetti in gold and silver stars, a spring mechanism left over from George's Halloween experiments, and a roll of transparent fishing line. My hands trembled slightly as I unpacked it all, not from fear, not anymore, but from precision. I needed every detail right. First came the camera, a new one. I'd bought it this morning at a small electronics store that still smelled faintly of sawdust and old batteries. Just need something small, I told the young man at the counter. Discreet and good in the dark. He'd handed me a tiny wireless camera, barely the size of a matchbox. Night vision, motion detection, sound, streams straight to your phone, he'd said proudly. You'll see everything. I placed it carefully between 2 books on my nightstand, the American Moth Field Guide and Flora of the Southern Counties, books that hadn't moved in years. The lens peeked just enough between the spines to catch the drawer and the person who would soon be snooping through it. I opened the camera app on my phone and watched the screen. The live feed was clean, the image sharp even in low light. I checked the sound. My voice came through crystal clear. Testing! Testing! If you're looking through my things, you're about to be very surprised. Then came the trap. I pulled open the drawer slowly, checking the placement. The velvet pouch containing the fake key was already resting inside, angled perfectly to draw her attention. She'd seen it once. She would return to it. Underneath the pouch, I placed the spring mechanism, tying the trigger to the edge of the drawer with a single strand of transparent filament. As soon as she lifted the pouch, even a fraction of an inch, the latch would snap, and the sequins would erupt upward in a shiny, dazzling explosion, straight into her face. I tested the mechanism 3 times using an old sock. Each time, it worked flawlessly, bursting with enough force to startle, but not to harm. I'd considered powder or ink. But no, glitter would do. Glitter humiliated. Glitter clung to everything. It didn't wash out of hair or off skin easily. It would mark her. Not just in the moment, but for days. And when Lorenzo came home and saw her covered in gold and silver stars, I wanted him to ask the question. And I wanted the video to answer it. The final touch was the audio sync. I checked the microphone sensitivity on the camera again, turned up just enough to capture whispers, the kind that criminals use in dark rooms when they think no one is listening. I whispered into the drawer, "It's all mine," and watched the sound levels spike. It worked. The rest of the drawer was filled with decoys, old insurance forms, expired credit cards, fake statements I'd printed that morning. Nothing valuable, nothing real. Just enough to make her feel like she'd found what she was looking for, because that's when people get sloppy, when they think they're winning. Outside, the light had started to shift. The shadows stretched longer. The smell of evening was in the air. Rain on asphalt, wood smoke somewhere down the street. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I stepped back, wiping my hands on a cloth. I'd done what I needed. The camera was positioned. The trap was set. The bait was glowing inside that velvet pouch like a promise. Now all I had to do was wait. Tonight would be her last mistake. Dinner was quiet, too quiet, like a stage right before the curtains open and the real show begins. Alexa had made chicken, the dry, unseasoned kind that no one with taste buds would call food. She sliced it into neat little pieces and arranged them like we were guests at a catering tasting, not a family home. I watched her over the rim of my water glass, letting my silence do the work. "Eat," she said cheerfully, nodding at my plate. "You need to keep up your strength, Susie." I smiled faintly. "Strength for what?" She laughed. "Oh, everything. I mean the house, the stress. You're up and down those stairs like a 20-year-old. I just don't want you to burn out. You've been forgetful lately." There it was again, her favorite little seed. Forgetful. Tired. Old. I nodded slowly, spearing a piece of chicken and letting it sit on the fork. You're right. I haven't been sleeping well either. Too much on my mind, I suppose. Exactly, she said, her eyes lighting up. Which is why I have just the thing. She stood and walked to the counter, her heels clicking softly on the tile. From her purse, not her coat pocket this time, no, she was being bolder now, she pulled a small orange pill bottle. It was unmarked. No label. No pharmacy. Just a smooth cylinder that rattled softly as she shook it. Melatonin? I asked lightly. Something like that, she said. Very mild. Lorenzo's used them for months. Just helps you get through the night without waking up every hour. She twisted off the cap and dropped 2 pale blue tablets onto the napkin next to my plate. Just take these with your tea. You'll sleep like a baby. I looked at the pills for a moment too long, then smiled like the old fool she assumed I was. Thank you, dear. That's very thoughtful. I picked up my teacup, tilted it slightly, then made a show of placing the pills in my mouth and taking a long sip. When I lowered the cup, I pressed my napkin delicately to my lips. There, let's hope they work. She watched me for another second, as if trying to read my face. But I've been hiding things longer than she's been alive. I smiled again, leaned back in my chair, and yawned, just enough to seem drowsy. Whew, I said, blinking slowly. I think they're already doing something. Might turn in a bit early tonight. Alexa grinned. Of course, rest is important. She cleaned up the table too quickly, barely rinsed the dishes. She wasn't interested in small talk anymore. She was waiting for the lights to go out. By 9:30, I was in my room. I left the door half open, the way I always do when I want to seem vulnerable. The hallway light spilled across the floor, catching on the edge of my worn slippers, the lace of my nightgown. But I wasn't going to bed, not yet. I walked to the camera on the nightstand, checked the feed on my phone. Still perfect. The drawer was centered in the frame. The velvet pouch was in place. The spring mechanism, wound and sensitive, was ready beneath it. All I had to do was wait. I lay down, pulled the blanket over my shoulders, and turned my head toward the camera. Just before I closed my eyes, I whispered, I'm awake. Then I went still. At first, the house settled the way it always does. Pipes groaned. A branch tapped against the bedroom window. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked once, twice, then fell silent. Then came the footsteps. Software deliberate. I kept my breathing steady, slow. I'd practiced earlier. The rhythm of a sleeping woman who's just dipped into the deepest part of night. I heard the creak of the floorboard outside my door. The door shifted open, silent as breath. I felt, rather than saw, her shadow cross the threshold. She was barefoot. I'd expected that. She didn't hesitate this time. Alexa moved with certainty, like a woman rehearsing the final act of a play she'd written herself. She crept toward the dresser, her movements slow but confident, and I watched her through slitted eyes as she knelt down beside the drawer. She wasn't nervous. She believed I was dead to the world, knocked out by her pills, too drowsy to know better. Her fingers hovered above the velvet pouch like a thief admiring the prize just before the heist. Then she took it. She lifted the pouch straight up. Snap! The mechanism triggered with a sharp release of tension, and then pop! The stars burst. A violent explosion of glitter and sequins erupted from the drawer, with a hiss of compressed air and a cascade of gold and silver light. The sequins sprayed across her face, into her hair, down her shirt, clinging to her arms, her eyelashes, the curve of her cheekbone. The pouch dropped to the floor. She screamed. Not a loud, theatrical shriek, but a startled, strangled sound of someone caught in the middle of something very wrong. Her hand flew to her mouth, and she stumbled backward, coughing, blinking through the shimmer that now coated her like a party gone wrong. I sat up. The lamp clicked on. Alexa froze. We stared at each other, her chest heaving, her face drenched in tiny stars, and me, sitting perfectly still, eyes calm, mouth tight, tablet in hand, the red recording light blinking gently on the corner of the screen. I'm sorry, she blurted. I thought I thought I heard something. I. You thought I was asleep, I said flatly. She opened her mouth, but no words came. And then, down the hallway, Mom! Alexa? What the hell's going on? Lorenzo's voice. Then footsteps. Fast. Confused. Heavy. He appeared in the doorway, suitcase still in hand, wearing his jacket and airport exhaustion. He looked at me first, sitting up in bed, eyes sharp, calm, in control. Then at Alexa. His mouth fell open. What is that? He said slowly. Alexa turned to him, blinking stars off her lashes, mouth moving, but nothing came out. I swung my legs out of bed, stood slowly, and held out the tablet. It's all on here, I said. Everything. The footage, the audio, the trap, and her. He didn't take the tablet. He just stared. You should watch it, I said, setting it gently on the edge of the dresser. Then we can talk, or not. That's up to you. Alexa turned to him, her voice trembling now. Lorenzo, please. I didn't mean. I was just trying to steal from my mother, he said quietly. No, I was checking. I thought she needed help. With what? I snapped. Finding her own keys, her financial papers, or getting conveniently knocked out while you crept through her bedroom like a thief? The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was loud with understanding. Lorenzo slowly rubbed a hand over his face, then looked down at his wife, still glitter-covered, shaking, disoriented. You drugged her, he said, his voice breaking. You tried to drug my mother. No, I just wanted to help. I thought she'd sleep better. You wanted her unconscious, he said, so you could rob her. While I was gone. That was your plan? She said nothing. Her whole body trembled. I walked over to the dresser, opened the drawer with calm hands, and lifted the real key. The one she thought she wanted. I held it up. You were never going to find the real safe, I said. George had it moved years ago, and the only copy of the deed is with my lawyer. Everything you thought you could take, it's protected, just like I am. Lorenzo turned to me, his face a kaleidoscope of grief, embarrassment, and something deeper, shame. I'm sorry, Mom, he said, his voice soft, nearly hoarse. I didn't know. I didn't see it. You didn't want to, I replied, but now you do. He nodded once. Alexa sank to the floor, her back against the wall, hands limp at her sides, stars glinting like tiny knives on her sleeves. I turned away. I was done watching her. Leave the tablet when you're done, I said to Lorenzo. And when she goes, make sure she takes every lie with her. Then I walked to the door and closed it behind me, leaving them both in the glittering wreckage of everything they thought they could hide. The house was so still, you could hear the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen 2 rooms away. Alexa hadn't moved since she slid down the wall in my bedroom, glitter clinging to her skin like a layer of guilt the vacuum cleaner would never reach. Lorenzo sat on the edge of the bed, elbows on his knees, hands pressed together like a man praying to wake up from the ugliest dream of his life. Neither of them spoke. I stood by the dresser for a long moment, then picked up the tablet. It was still warm in my hand, the screen glowing softly, with the pause symbol flickering over the captured footage of Alexa's glitter explosion. The live camera feed had ended, but that wasn't the only recording I had saved. Lorenzo, I said quietly, tapping through the files. There's more. He looked up, his eyes clouded and bloodshot, not from tears, not yet, but from the slow realization that something rotten had been under his roof for years, and he'd done nothing but give it water and sunlight. She's not just a liar, I continued. She's not just greedy. She was planning this for weeks, maybe longer, and she wasn't working alone. Alexa stirred slightly, blinking. What are you talking about? I ignored her. The moment had shifted. I tapped the file labeled Guest Room Audio 2am.wav, the one from 2 nights ago, when she'd made that hushed call in the guest room while I sat silently outside the door, hearing every word she'd never say to our faces. The room filled with her voice. I saw the corner of a second safe under that stupid quilt she keeps folded in the closet. If it's what I think it is, it's all there. Documents, property papers, probably cash. Lorenzo's body stiffened. Alexa's lips parted, as if to interrupt, but I held up a hand. She's so easy. All I had to do was bring her tea and ask if she was sleeping well. She babbles about being tired all the time. Old people practically walk into their own graves. The blood drained from my son's face. We'll wait until he's gone. He's at that conference until Friday. She'll be alone. I'll use the side gate. No alarms. She doesn't even know how half the technology in this house works. Pause. Muffled breathing. Then, I just need one more night to find the key. She hides everything in that top drawer. If it's not there, I'll get her to hand it over. She trusts me. She thinks I'm helping her. Poor thing. I stopped the audio. Lorenzo's eyes flicked toward Alexa. She opened her mouth. That's not how I meant it. He didn't blink. You told someone she was walking into her grave, he said, his voice hollow. It was a joke, she said quickly. I was venting. You know how I get when I'm stressed. He cut her off. Who were you talking to? Silence. Alexa, he said, standing now, his voice rising but steady, the kind of cold calm that comes when rage has calcified into something sharper. Who were you talking to? She stood slowly, brushing a hand down her glitter-covered blouse like she could smooth away what had been exposed. I didn't want to tell you, she said, switching gears, voice softer now, more calculated. Because I didn't want you to worry. It was just an old friend. From Vegas. Vegas, Lorenzo repeated. You told me you hated Vegas. She hesitated. I do. But when I was younger, before we met, Don't do that, he snapped. Don't throw dirt in the air and hope it clouds the truth. You lied. You were planning to rob her while I was gone. Her expression shifted. Desperation now. Lorenzo, listen to me. We've been struggling. You know we've been struggling. You got laid off, remember? I was trying to keep us afloat. You mean by forging a new career in crime? I didn't take anything, she shouted. I didn't hurt her. Because you got caught. She flinched. I have debts, okay? She hissed. You know that. You saw the credit cards. I was going to figure it out. I just needed a little help getting back on my feet. By stealing from my mother. I wasn't going to steal. Alexa. The word cracked across the room like a whip. I heard you say it. You said you just needed to find the key. You said she wouldn't even notice. That was before Before you what? He shouted. Before you broke into her room in the middle of the night? Before you tried to drug her? Before you lied to me for the 1,000th time? I panicked, she cried. I was scared. The debts. They're not just credit cards anymore. I owe people, Lorenzo. Real people. I had no choice. You always had a choice, I said coldly from behind him. You just never considered the one where you told the truth. She spun toward me, her face red now, glitter sticking to the sweat on her cheeks. You don't understand what it's like to be stuck, to be desperate. You sit in this house with your cozy furniture and your little routines, and your perfect husband who left you everything while I have to. I understand betrayal, I said softly. That's what this is. Alexa turned back to Lorenzo, clutching at his sleeve. Please, you know I love you. You know that. We're married. I made a mistake. One mistake. This wasn't one mistake, he said quietly. It was a plan, a method. You've been working on this for weeks, maybe longer. She shook her head. I just didn't know how to fix it. The money, the pressure. And I didn't want to ask you. You already think I'm a failure. No, he said. I thought you were lost. But now I see. You're not lost. You're calculated. She took a shaky step forward. Lorenzo, please. But he didn't touch her. Instead, he turned to me. I'm so sorry, Mom, For everything, for not seeing it, for not protecting you. I shook my head. You didn't put her hand in that drawer. She did that herself. He turned back to Alexa. Go. She froze. What? Get out. Tonight. You can't be serious. He said nothing. Her voice trembled. Where would I go? I don't care. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. Alexa looked from him to me, then back again, as if waiting for one of us to blink, to soften, to let her twist her way back in. But we didn't. You're choosing her over me, she whispered, wounded now, trying a new mask. No, Lorenzo said flatly. I'm choosing right over wrong, and that just happens to be the woman who raised me. Tears started to gather at the corners of her eyes, but neither of us moved. She left without another word. She didn't pack a bag. She didn't ask for money. She walked out the front door with glitter in her hair and shame trailing behind her, like perfume that no water would wash off. Lorenzo sat back down on the edge of my bed and covered his face with both hands. I said nothing. After a long moment, he lifted his head. Did Dad know? About her? No, I said, but he knew enough to prepare for this kind of betrayal. He nodded slowly. Then, after another pause, Can I stay here tonight? I smiled, a little sad, a little tired. Of course you can. And just like that, for the first time in years, I saw my son clearly. Not the husband trying to please someone he'd never satisfy, not the tired man juggling bills and tension, but my boy, who once asked me to read to him every night, who cried when the dog ran away, who used to call just to say he missed home. He was back now, and the door that had almost closed on us was open again, not because I'd stayed quiet, but because I'd chosen to see, and record, and wait. She thought I was asleep. She was wrong. The morning after the trap sprang, the sky outside was overcast, the kind of gray that makes the world look washed out and quieter than it really is. I stood by the window in the kitchen, slowly stirring a pot of oatmeal, the scent of cinnamon and cardamom hanging in the air. Behind me, I could hear Lorenzo's slow footsteps moving through the house like someone waking up from a long, disorienting dream. He hadn't slept much, I could tell. His face was drawn, his eyes shadowed with something deeper than fatigue, that hollow look you wear when you realize you've been loving someone who never truly loved you back. Alexa hadn't left yet. That surprised me, to be honest. She was still upstairs in the guest room. I'd heard her pacing back and forth through the ceiling in the early morning hours, stopping every so often, no doubt rehearsing another version of the story, another rewrite of the truth she thought she could sell. But Lorenzo wasn't buying anything anymore. He walked into the kitchen just as I was spooning oatmeal into 2 bowls. He didn't say good morning. He just sat down, slowly, like the weight of everything hadn't quite settled yet. I placed a bowl in front of him and sat down across the table. We ate in silence for a few minutes, the only sound the occasional clink of spoon against ceramic. Outside, a bird chirped, distant, uncertain. Finally, he spoke. She's still here. I nodded. I know. He set his spoon down, rubbed his temples with both hands. I don't even know why she stayed. It's over. She knows it. She's hoping you don't, I said gently. He looked at me, a tired, crooked smile at the edge of his mouth. You always see through people, don't you? No, I said. I just stopped pretending not to. He nodded slowly, then pushed his chair back and stood up. I should say it, out loud. She needs to hear it from me. I think she already knows, but yes, some things need to be said. He left the kitchen, his footsteps heavier now, more resolved. I watched from the hallway as he climbed the stairs. A few minutes passed. Then I heard the door open. And then came her voice, low, soft, sickly sweet, just like it had been the night she offered me those pills. Lorenzo, Alexa began, please, sit down. Let me explain everything the right way. There's nothing left to explain, he said, I made mistakes. I know that. But I panicked. I wasn't thinking clearly. You have to understand, I never meant to hurt anyone. You planned it, Lorenzo said, his voice sharp now. You searched drawers. You drugged my mother. You called someone in the middle of the night to arrange a robbery. I was desperate, she replied, her voice cracking. We were broke. The bills were piling up. You lost your job, remember? I was drowning, Lorenzo. We were broke, he repeated. Not you. We. And you used that as a license to betray both of us? I didn't betray you, she snapped, then softened immediately. I didn't. I swear, I was trying to save us. You were trying to save yourself. I was scared, she whispered. We were all scared, he said. But we didn't turn on each other. Only you did that. There was a long silence. I stepped back into the kitchen, giving them privacy, but I could still hear her voice through the floorboards above, trembling now, more desperate. What about everything we've been through? She pleaded. Our marriage? Our vows? That's not worth anything now? Lorenzo's answer came quickly. Vows mean nothing without trust. You didn't just lie. You plotted. You brought someone else into it. You made plans behind my back. I didn't know what else to do. You could have told me the truth, he said. You could have said you were in over your head. We could have figured something out. But you chose to see my mother as an ATM with a heartbeat. That line hung in the air for a moment. Then came the soft sound of Alexa beginning to cry. Lorenzo, please, you can't just throw me away. You threw us away, he said, voice flat now. When you looked into my mother's face, smiled at her, and then tried to rob her while I was gone, that's the moment you threw this away. I didn't take anything, she sobbed, because you were caught. Another silence. Then, more quietly, I'm asking you, he said, to leave. Now I won't humiliate you. I won't call the police, but I never want to see you in this house again. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Then came the soft shuffle of movement, a zipper, the quiet squeak of a suitcase wheel. Alexa's voice was barely audible. Where am I supposed to go? Lorenzo's answer was quiet. That's not my problem anymore. A few minutes later, she came down the stairs. I caught a glimpse of her as she passed by the living room window. She didn't look at me. Her eyes were hollow. Her jacket was still covered in tiny, golden specks of glitter. They glimmered in the morning light with every step. She walked out the front door, dragging her wheeled suitcase behind her, like an anchor she'd finally earned. And as the door clicked shut behind her, a trail of glitter was left on the hardwood floor. A perfect metaphor for everything she'd tried to bury but couldn't. Some stains don't wash out. Lorenzo returned to the kitchen, and for a moment we just stood there, staring at the floor. Neither of us spoke. Then I went to the cabinet, poured 2 cups of coffee, and handed one to him. We sat in the silence together, side by side this time. I don't even know who she is, he said, voice low. You do now, I replied. He looked down at his hands, fingers curling into fists, then relaxing. How did I not see it? All this time, all the lies, the stories, the nights she'd leave for appointments, the odd receipts, the late payments. I kept blaming myself. That's what people like her do, I said. They twist your instincts until you stop trusting yourself, until you need them to tell you what's real. He rubbed his forehead, groaning softly. I let her turn me against you. You didn't turn against me, I said gently. You drifted. There's a difference. And you're back now. He looked at me then, really looked at me. His face was different now, not just older, but fuller, real. Not the man trying to juggle illusions, but someone who had dropped them and finally felt the ground beneath his feet again. I don't know how to fix this, he whispered. The debts, the damage, all of it. One thing at a time, I said. We'll start with the truth, then we go from there. He gave a short, shaky laugh. You always make it sound so simple. It's never simple, I said, but it can be clear. We sat like that for a while, sipping coffee, watching the clouds shift outside the window. The house felt different now, not heavier, but lighter. The tension had left with her. The lies, the manipulation, the constant air of suspicion. And in its place was something that had been missing for far too long. Honesty. He reached over and put his hand on mine. It was warm, solid. "Thanks, Mom," he said, "for not giving up, for being 5 steps ahead of everyone, for setting that glitter trap." I smiled, just a little. "Your father always said, if you want the truth, shake the tree hard enough and see what falls." I just added sparkle. We both laughed, and it wasn't hollow this time. It was real. And as the day unfolded, and the trail of sequins slowly got vacuumed up, one by one, we knew something else too. That we'd survived something ugly and come out stronger. She thought I was asleep. She thought she could lie her way through life. But glitter always leaves a trail. And now, it led right out the front door. And away from both of us. It's been 3 months since Alexa walked out of the house with that suitcase and a glitter trail behind her. And not once in all that time has her name passed through the front door again. Not by me, not by Lorenzo, not even in whispers. 3 months isn't much in the grand scheme of life, but in our house, in the silence that followed her departure, it's been a quiet revolution, a steady, healing stretch of ordinary days that have somehow meant more than years of strained holidays and clenched smiles. Lorenzo lives here now, not as a burden, not as someone who needs shelter, but as my son again. As someone who comes into the kitchen in the morning barefoot, hair sticking up, yawning and smiling in that lopsided way he always did as a boy. Someone who knocks politely on my door before asking if I want to walk to the corner store with him. Someone who tells me what he's reading at work and listens when I talk about the irises starting to bloom by the back fence. And oh, he's working now, full-time, at the local library, of all places. It started as something simple. After the fallout, he needed space, purpose, something stable that didn't remind him of the mess his life had become. So when he saw the little paper sign on the notice board outside our grocery store, "Library assistant wanted, part-time, flexible hours, patience and book handling required," he applied without much hope, but they hired him, and within a week, he was shelving books like he'd been doing it for years. He liked the rhythm of it, the quiet, said it helped him think. Within a month, they asked if he'd like to stay on full-time. He said yes without hesitation. Now he walks to work most mornings. The library's only a 15-minute stroll through our sleepy town, past the church, the flower shop with its lopsided sunflowers, and the bakery that still sells those lemon pastries George used to love. Some days I go with him just to stretch my legs. Other days, I watch from the window as he adjusts the strap on his canvas bag and sets off with that steady, quiet purpose that used to live under all that pain. He's a different man now. Not changed exactly, more like uncovered. Like the fog that surrounded him for years has finally burned off, and now he can breathe again. The divorce went through 2 weeks ago. Clean, no fault, no drama. Alexa didn't dispute anything. Not the property division, not the settlement. Not even the fact that Lorenzo requested no contact going forward. She signed the papers, sent them back by courier, and vanished back into whatever life she came from. Vegas, or some other glitter-dusted corner of borrowed charm and whispered lies. I don't ask if he misses her. He doesn't bring her up, and I don't press. But I know there's a sadness still tucked inside him. Not for her, but for the time lost. The years spent believing a fiction. The effort he poured into someone who viewed him more as a stepping stone than a partner. But there's strength in him now. A quiet, firm resilience that grows every day. It shows in the way he folds laundry without being asked, the way he keeps his side of the garage tidy, the way he reads late into the night and jots down notes in the margins of books. Sometimes he'll sit at the kitchen table with a mug of tea, and I'll ask what he's thinking about. "Nothing," he'll say. "Just how good quiet feels." And I understand that, because the quiet now is different than it used to be. Before, silence in this house was a tight thing, something that held its breath, waiting for the next sharp word or cold smile. Now it's soft, spacious. We let it sit between us like an old friend who doesn't need to be entertained. Some evenings, we cook together. Simple things: roasted chicken, baked potatoes, soups from scratch. We eat at the table, no television, no distractions. Just the clink of cutlery and the occasional laugh when he misreads a recipe, or I forget where I put the salt. Once a week, we do something small together. A movie at the community center, a puzzle, gardening. It's not about entertainment. It's about rebuilding trust, not just between us, but in ourselves. One Sunday, I found him repainting the old bench in the backyard. I hadn't even asked. "I thought it deserved a second chance," he said, brushing on that deep green George had loved. I stood there with the garden hose still running behind me, looking at my son. Sleeves rolled up, expression peaceful, and I nearly cried. Not because I was sad, but because peace, when it finally returns, doesn't come like fireworks. It comes like that: a man repainting a bench on a quiet morning, humming under his breath, choosing to stay. Even the house feels different now. Lighter, warmer. Alexa's things, the designer shoes, the scented candles, the stacks of glossy magazines. They're all gone. What's left are the things that matter. The framed pictures from the beach trip when Lorenzo was 10, the needlepoint George's sister made, the ceramic duck I hated but never got rid of. Memory markers, real things. No pretense. Some of Lorenzo's boxes are still in the hallway. He says he'll unpack them eventually. I don't rush him. His room upstairs is filled with books now: library cast-offs, secondhand finds, paperbacks with cracked spines. The other night, he came down holding a copy of The Old Man and the Sea. "You ever read this?" he asked. I nodded. "Long time ago." He grinned. "I think you'd like it more now." He was right. I read it again the next afternoon, sitting by the window with the soft breeze curling around my ankles. That's what life looks like now. Soft moments, small things. Books shared. Meals made together. Laughter that comes not from relief, but from joy. We've both been through something dark, but we didn't let it hollow us out. We didn't let it make us cruel. And that's something to hold on to. One morning, I came into the kitchen and found a note by the coffee pot. Just one line, written in Lorenzo's familiar handwriting. "Thanks for staying awake, Mom." It stayed on the fridge for weeks. Sometimes the biggest triumph isn't in confronting the enemy, but in refusing to go numb, in choosing to see what's in front of you, and to act on it. 3 months ago, Alexa thought I was asleep. She thought I was gullible, blind, tired. But I stayed awake, and because I did, I got my son back. Not the broken man he became under her lies, the one I raised, and the one who finally came home. It was a Thursday afternoon, bright and windy, the kind of day where the clouds move too fast and the leaves chase each other across the sidewalk like children playing tag. I was sitting on the front porch, a glass of iced tea in my hand, and the scent of fresh-cut grass rising from somewhere down the street. Lorenzo came home from the library just after 4. He was whistling softly, a habit he used to have in high school, one I hadn't heard in years. His messenger bag was slung across his chest, and he had that look on his face again, calm, rested, almost amused. He walked up the porch steps and dropped into the chair next to me, brushing his hair back with one hand. "You'll never guess what someone asked me at the checkout desk today." I smiled and took a sip of tea. "Do I want to guess?" He leaned back and chuckled. "Mr. Henley, the guy who always returns his books late and pretends he didn't know the due date. He looked at me real serious and said, 'So, you still using glitter bombs over at your place? Or was that a one-time thing?' I couldn't help it. I laughed. Loud and real. Lorenzo grinned. Apparently, word got out. "Oh, it got out all right," I said, wiping the corner of my eye with a napkin. "Judy at the grocery store asked me last week if I was starting a security company. I told her I only work in sequins and treachery. He laughed so hard, he leaned forward, hand over his face. Mom, he said, still catching his breath, I don't think you realize, that whole thing, it's become a bit of a legend around town. I raised an eyebrow. Is that so? Oh yeah, he nodded. I overheard Mrs. Langley telling her bridge group, well, if Susie can protect her retirement with a glitter cannon, I might just install a fog machine in my living room. I chuckled again. Maybe I should patent the design. He looked over at me, smile softening, something deeper passing behind his eyes. You know, he said more seriously now, I don't think I ever properly said thank you. I turned to him, tilting my head. You've said thank you 100 times. He shook his head. No, not for that. Not just for giving me a place to land or letting me pick up the pieces. I mean for seeing it, for staying awake, for knowing, for not letting her get away with it. And for, he paused, a grin pulling at the corner of his mouth, for building a literal trap full of glitter. It was sequins too, I said proudly. Of course, he said. Wouldn't have been as poetic without the silver stars. We sat in silence for a moment. The wind tugged gently at the wind chimes above us, sending soft notes into the air. Somewhere down the block, a lawnmower buzzed to life. I watched the breeze ruffle Lorenzo's shirt sleeve, and I thought, this is peace. Right here. No fanfare, no justice of the court, no grand confrontation in a courtroom. Just this. A porch, a sun, a joke shared in the afternoon light. You know what I keep thinking about? He said after a while. What's that? That moment. The second she pulled the pouch, and the glitter went off. The look on her face. It wasn't even just shock. It was like everything she'd hidden finally exploded out of her. I nodded. Truth has a way of finding light, sometimes in the most dramatic fashion. He smirked. Yeah, I used to think that justice meant calling the police or dragging someone to court, making it official. And now? He looked at me. Now I think, sometimes justice looks like an old woman with a drawer full of stars and a camera hidden in a copy of Moths of the Midwest. I laughed again. Well, George always said that book was good for something. We both smiled, but his expression turned thoughtful again. I was so blind, he said quietly, so wrapped up in making things work. I ignored every red flag, every lie. I made excuses for her even when I knew something was wrong. And I left you alone in the same house with someone who was plotting against you. You trusted someone, I said simply. That's not a sin. But you didn't, he said. You listened to your gut, and instead of yelling or accusing or trying to argue with someone who could spin anything, you did something smarter. You gave her the rope and let her hang herself. I looked out at the street, at the neat line of driveways, the maple tree George had planted, leaning slightly in the wind. Sometimes arguing with a liar is like wrestling in the mud. You both get dirty, but the liar likes it. So, I built a trap. Quietly, carefully, and I waited. And she walked right into it. She always would have, I said. That kind of person can't help it. They think everyone else is blind, that everyone's asleep. He nodded. But you weren't. No, I said. I wasn't. He picked at the edge of his sleeve, then looked up at me again. I don't think I've ever been prouder to be your son than the day she set off that glitter. I mean, what a move. It was flashy, I agreed, but sometimes it's the only language people like her understand. Spectacle, he said. Exposure, I corrected. The truth needed to shine, and now it has. We sat there until the sun started to lower in the sky, painting the porch in amber hues. The wind softened. A few kids rode past on bicycles, laughing, the sound trailing off as they turned the corner. Lorenzo took a deep breath. You think she'll ever try to come back? I don't know, I said. But I do know this. She's not the same woman anymore. She's been seen, and people like her. They don't like mirrors. He nodded slowly. I don't think she could face you again. I smiled. That's the other thing about glitter, you know? What's that? It gets everywhere. You can't run from it. You can't wash it off. Weeks later, she'll open a drawer and find a gold star clinging to the back of her nail file. He laughed, that open, honest laugh again, and stood up, stretching. You want to come help me sort the new donation bins at the library tomorrow? He asked. You'd love the paperbacks they just brought in. Whole box of mysteries. I stood too, brushing the crumbs off my skirt. Of course. But I'm not bringing cookies again. The last time, the volunteers nearly trampled me. He smiled and reached for the door. Deal. As we stepped inside, I glanced back once at the porch, at the shadows growing longer across the planks, and I thought about how far we'd come. Not just from that night 3 months ago, but from all the years before that. All the silence, the doubt, the manipulation. It was over now, not because of police, not because of lawyers, because of a drawer, a fake key, and a handful of sequins that told the truth. Sometimes justice doesn't come from courtrooms. Sometimes it comes in sparkles. And sometimes that's enough.